I can look at what you've done, and I can see somebody who is abhorrent and despicable and actually evil. Actually, the stuff when you target someone's widow as she grieves and
Once
tries
again,
to
I
protect
disagree
her
with the
two
word
children.
targeting.
No,
I think
I'm talking about me. I'm talking about me personally. My view of what you've done. I don't care about your motivation in terms of other people's inappropriate memes, many of which I may well agree with you about. But that doesn't mean that I then go and do it myself, or worse, because that makes me even more inhuman and abhorrent.
You know, I really do hate Piers Morgan's show the more that I think about it, because essentially what the premise of so many of his episodes actually is that he will find somebody who posts the most incendiary, ridiculous, over-the-top take. They post this, by the way, for attention. Then he will bring that person on the show, thus giving him that attention, broadcast the thing that Piers is about to condemn to a much larger audience, all so that Piers Morgan could say, I think that's reprehensible, in his British accent, all while he rakes in the cash. It's absolutely disgusting when you think about it, and a perfect example, a perfect distillation of this premise is the recent episode that featured the amazing Lucas, who, by the way, is a guy who used to be a right-wing YouTuber, but then decided that he was going to flip to be a black radical because he started becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the failures among the black population in the United States of America, so he went into full denial of those failures. He now talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome and all sorts of ridiculous things like that, and essentially he went from a guy who would do vaguely intro to conservative basics right-wing talking points that weren't even that interesting in the first place, to a guy who basically covers up all the problems in the black community, much like a family that has a destructive alcoholic in it ends up not wanting people on the outside to know about that alcoholic and would rather have the family suffer than actually suffer the embarrassment of confronting reality. That's who Amazing Lucas is, an anti-white absolute loser who, again, can't take responsibility for his own life, doesn't want black people to take responsibility for their own lives, and in addition to that, thinks that putting white people down ends up helping black people in some ridiculous and absurd way. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
You've posted some messages about Charlie Kirk on your Instagram, which we're going to show here. One is a post that's a parody of a Jubilee debate. I'm doing one of these myself soon, titled Charlie Kirk versus Bullet. Can one bullet to the neck outsmart one conservative? Well, that was a short watch. Number two is a mocked up promotion poster called Kirk and Twerk at Neck of the Woods and hashtagged both Charlie Kirk and his widow. And the third was an image of a sunrise titled God Works in Mysterious Ways with the hashtag Charlie Kirk killing and praying hands as an emoji. And you're laughing as I show these. Why do you find this funny?
So remember what I said about the premise of Piers Morgan's show? The fact is, the Amazing Lucas's Instagram posts are disgusting. They're reprehensible, and obviously so. But in reality, they would not get as much play out in the world, but for the fact that Piers Morgan decided to bring them up on air in order to shame Lucas, who, again, he provided a platform to in order to do so. And by the way, a lot of people ask me to do this show or that show, and in reality, it is not up to me to be invited on these shows, so please stop telling me to go on other people's shows when I'm not actually invited there. And B, the reason that I don't get invited to shows like the Piers Morgan show is because you don't see me doing this kind of nonsense on the internet.com in order to get attention. I'm fine growing on my own, actually telling you what I think, not just trying to gin up hysteria and shock value a la Destiny, a la the Amazing Lucas, because unlike them, I actually think the substance of my arguments hold water, and I don't want to be a clown who's brought on to perform for somebody like Piers Morgan. But again, Lucas has no hesitation in playing that role because it's all about attention for a guy like him.
Well, let me just say that I actually am a big advocate for dark humor, and I happen to have gotten a bit of a taste of that over the last, I don't know, maybe decade or so when it came to the right and their memes of George Floyd. happy birthday being sober for 5 years. When they came to their memes of Breonna Taylor.
So much like Destiny, the amazing Lucas ends up hiding behind a very thinly veiled justification for his own hatred towards white people, and he ends up basically saying that, oh, there's this George Floyd meme where it says 5 years sober for George Floyd. Again, who gives a damn about that? If you want to be upset about that, feel free to call out the people that are making those memes. That doesn't really excuse you mocking Charlie Kirk's assassination, and then, of course, tagging his wife in that in order to get attention. Then he says Breonna Taylor gets mocked, and honestly, we haven't really seen a lot of Breonna Taylor being made fun of. Most people agree on all sides that she's essentially an innocent victim in that particular case. It just so happens that her ex-boyfriend, the guy who was a drug dealer, ended up getting packages at her property. Her current boyfriend, who was at the property at the time with Breonna, thought that the police were actually him breaking in, so he fired at a cop, hitting the cop in the leg. The cops fired into the apartment, thinking that they were getting shot at by the drug dealer, and that ultimately ended up leading to the death of Breonna Taylor, but there isn't a lot of mockery of her.
When it came to their memes of Trayvon Martin, the Trayvon challenge, right? When it came to their memes of Tamir Rice. So I don't know what the issue is. I think I'm engaging in the freedom of speech that the right has been advocating for these last 10 years and mocking and making light of Black death. Something that Charlie Kirk himself did time and time again.
So then he brings up Trayvon Martin, who's shot by George Zimmerman, the half-Hispanic guy that the media tried to paint as a white supremacist. And of course, he brings up Tamir Rice, who was shot by the police in Ohio because he had a BB gun or some kind of not real handgun that looked like a gun. And the police pulled up, they tried to tell him to drop it. And then Tamir Rice ended up going for said gun, and he ultimately ended up getting shot. Now, there are criticisms, by the way, of the police in the Tamir Rice case. We've actually went over that case on this channel before, but again, these are all just thinly veiled justifications, and of course, amazing Lucas taking the cases of these different various Black people so personally that he feels like he has to go after Charlie Kirk, but in reality, one does not justify the other, and the idea that he's a proponent of dark humor, but also it's revenge, those are two conflicting explanations. Like, you guys understand what's going on right here, right?
Matter of fact, I would argue that if Charlie Kirk, instead of focusing his time on Black culture and Black on Black crime, if he had spent a modicum of his time focusing on the white youth, that perhaps he would still be with us today.
So there you have the amazing Lucas saying that, oh, Charlie Kirk should have spent a modicum of his time focusing on the white youth, therefore he would be alive to this very day, as if Charlie Kirk didn't actually do that. He didn't actually engage with the youth out there in the world. But again, this is the amazing Lucas projecting his insecurities about the absolute failures of various Black communities around the country. And what he's trying to do is be like, oh, you should have talked about white youth instead of Black youth, when in reality, Black youth is way disproportionately more criminal. And by the way, considering the victims of Black crime are disproportionately Black people, what the amazing Lucas is trying to do is protect Black feelings over Black lives. That's the irony of this, is that if everybody did what he wanted, which was ignore the significant problems, specifically violent crime problems among Black communities, in order to spare Lucas's feelings, in order for him not to confront the issues within his own community, then in reality, that would lead to more Black deaths. So again, this is just a pathetic explanation for this. It's a pathetic justification, and it just shows you the profound weakness of somebody like amazing Lucas, which, by the way, he's about to show you again when Piers Morgan asked him directly if he's happy about Charlie Kirk's death.
Are you pleased he's dead?
No, absolutely not.
So how did you feel about his murder?
I don't think.
How did you feel about his murder?
So Piers asked him if he was happy about Charlie Kirk's death, and he says, no, absolutely not. And then Piers says, how did you feel about his murder? And Lucas is going to tell us that he was happy about it because, again, he sees Charlie Kirk as successful white man. Charlie Kirk sometimes talked about problems in Black communities. Therefore, he is the enemy of the amazing Lucas, and he somehow thinks Black people will be enriched by Charlie Kirk being murdered.
How do I feel about his murder?
Yeah.
Well, I think a quote by a great author sums up the sentiment of millions of Americans around the world. And that is, some cause happiness wherever they go, others when they go. And I think that's a sentiment that is palpable amongst many Americans around the world.
So Lucas ends up using that quote right there to say that he is happy about this, but of course he does it in the most cowardly, weak way. When he's confronted again by Piers Morgan, he ends up denying it, and then he starts talking about this is why many Americans around the world ended up feeling like this, because I also have to point out that Lucas doesn't really know how to talk. He's not in command of the English language, and it's actually embarrassing to hear this man speak, especially when you actually listen to the verbiage that he's using.
Due to the hate and vitriol and bile that Charlie Kirk sowed. So I think there was a
just to be clear, unless I misheard you, then you are happy he died.
No, I don't think as far as happiness is an emotion that
you literally just read me a quote which implies you're happy. You talked about some people's death bring happiness.
So, of course, Lucas says, oh, he did all this hatred and bile and whatnot. He didn't. Again, he's victimizing himself. He's saying black people are the victims, even though black people are not the main character of the United States of America. They're not the main character in Charlie Kirk's life, and they're not the main character in the death of Charlie Kirk. Nobody gives a damn about your insecurity about the failures among black Americans. Get over it, push them to succeed, and stop trying to deny the problems within those communities. In addition to that, he's going to back off like a coward, even though he just read a quote about how happy he was, again, saying it without saying it, and it's absolutely cowardly. He knows why he's on this. He has been celebrating it publicly, and yet he is in full denial of it on Piers Morgan when directly asked. Now, indirectly, he'll dance around this. He'll tell you how he really feels about this, and it just goes to show you what a scumbag he actually is.
The purpose of the quote was to say that there are some people who have caused harm and death and turmoil to other groups of people, such as Charlie Kirk, whether it's black people, whether it's, trans people.
So again, he talks about how Charlie Kirk hurt black people so much by talking about the actual real problems within various black communities around the country. Again, amazing Lucas's position is that if you have an abusive alcoholic in the family, it's more important that nobody knows outside of the family rather than, addressing the problems caused by said abusive alcoholic within the family. And then Pierce ends up asking him again, and Lucas denies it in the most cowardly way.
I heard the quote, but just to be clear, you said that the quote ends in that their death brings happiness, but you've denied that you were happy. But when you tell me a quote
I don't disagree.
When you tell me a quote like that, I presume from that quote you're implying that actually you are happy he died because he deserved it. He had it coming.
No, not at all. I don't think those are ever words that I've ever mentioned verbatim ever.
Such a brave guy Lucas is. He never said those words specifically verbatim. He never used those exact words in that order. Therefore, you can't draw that conclusion, Pierce, which, by the way, Piers Morgan acknowledges. He points out that he quoted an author specifically to imply that he was happy, but Lucas too cowardly to address that. He also tries to pin it on other people, which again is a pattern from his own life where he tries to blame the problems from within the black community that are caused by members of the black community on white people, because he's always trying to shift the blame, never can take responsibility for anything in his own life.
There is a sentiment that when someone who lives their life in evil and wickedness, according to the scripture, the power of life and death is in your tongue. And the hate and the vile and the venom that he spewed, I don't know what to tell you. As the scripture says, as he professed, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I think his focus should have been on a community that, clearly is in problem. That I find it interesting that there's more scrutiny on people who may make memes that they've done of George Floyd and other black victims than on the white male youth that did this tragedy, as some would call it.
So you notice, by the way, that the ginger is nodding along while Lucas is spewing this absolute insanity. And again, I will point out his obsession with the white youth and problems within the white community is absolutely absurd and ass backwards, because yes, even though this person happened to be a white guy that shot Charlie Kirk, ignoring the wildly disproportionate levels of violence among black communities in the black youth doesn't actually help them. The irony is this guy thinks he's the big defender of black people, but in reality, he's perfectly fine with those elevated rates of homicide. He's perfectly fine excusing it. In fact, he's uncomfortable by the idea of you pointing out the reality of the situation. So essentially, he's lashing out and crying about it. And the fact that he keeps bringing this up really goes to show you how insecure he actually is. It's really genuinely pathetic.
I think this hypocrisy is ubiquitous within the right. And I think my memes expose that hypocrisy.
And what about your own personal humanity? I mean, hashtagging his widow in a mocked-up promotion poster of Kirk and Twerk at Neck of the Woods? How do you justify targeting... Oh, well, hang on. How do you justify targeting his widow?
I think that's a bit disingenuous to use such hyperbolic language as targeting. I think it's more of a strategic plan of attack to get the message out to more people.
So one of the most impressive things about this is that Lucas has a horrible comprehension of the English language. He's like, I think it's really disingenuous of you, Pierce, to use the language of targeting. And then he proceeds to describe what he did, which is, by the way, the definition of targeting. Lucas, what is wrong with you? Are you okay? Are you off your medication? Do you need some help? Do we need to call a doctor for you, buddy? I think you're unwell.
When we saw Erica Kirk, she had a moment to speak for unity within the country, left and right. And she chose to fundraise. She then chose to use the scripture and talk, very nicely of her, past husband. And I understand that. But by that same token, there are people who were absolutely harmed by the rhetoric that Charlie Kirk put out. And that rhetoric actually codified in many cases in many states. So I think it's abhorrent and actually perverse to expect people who are harmed by his rhetoric, harmed by someone who had anti-Black, anyone who wasn't white and Christian in his perspective. I think it's perverse to try and criticize those people or try and make them seem as if they're the bad guys.
Again, notice Lucas distancing himself from his own actions, much in the same way that he distances Black America from responsibility from their own actions. He keeps talking about how you can't expect people to do this, how people are going to react like this. And this is the reason why people are upset about this. And the crazy thing is that while he's talking about all the harm that Charlie Kirk allegedly did across the society, oh my God, he hurt all the Blacks and the non-white Christians. In reality, Amazing Lucas, his whole brand was boosted up by Turning Point. This is a former Turning Point USA ambassador, so his career was aided by Charlie Kirk's organization. He owes part of his success to Charlie Kirk. He was directly helped by him, but then he's like, oh my God, white people help me. Charlie Kirk stuck his hand into the gutter to lift me up. I can't deal with that. I can't deal with that cognitive dissonance. So I'm going to talk about how he harmed all these vague, undefined people. Shut up, Lucas.
When that's
but see, funny
the
enough, I can look at what you've done and I can see somebody who is abhorrent and despicable and actually evil, actually. The stuff when you target someone's widow as she grieves.
Once again, I disagree with the word targeting.
Again, Lucas might actually be unwell because he listens to what Pierce says, and the only thing he objects to is the word targeting. But as we said before, Lucas quite literally used the definition of targeting in his defense of what he was doing. In his own description, he described targeting, but the man is too stupid to understand what he's actually doing. Again, this guy is very much in trouble. He very much needs his medication. Somebody help him.
When it comes to Republicans, when it comes to conservatives,
I know, hang on.
They have to see.
I've let you have your
I think
say.
I'm a mirror
I've let you have your
what
say.
they have shown.
I'll let you have
and
your say.
If they don't like what they see,
telling you,
they should actually detour
fine.
from
I'm
the
using
wicked
your
path.
own.
Now, Lucas says that he's a mirror. I think he's trying to say the word mirror of Republicans' wicked behavior. And again, this is much like Destiny's behavior and how he justifies it, blaming it on Trump. And I will just point out to Lucas, Destiny, and all these ridiculous leftists that want a built-in excuse in order to not be held accountable. The only thing you can control is your own behavior.
I find this exceptionally sad because, Lucas, you talk about how hurt you were and how offended you were by such despicable things, and then you became the thing that you found the most repulsive, which is alarming, and as I mentioned, deeply saddening. I would be more than happy to litigate some of Charlie's positions for you. Abjectly.
So Julia Michaels ends up trying to counter Lucas's points, and Lucas gets really upset that she's actually bringing up counter arguments, so he decides to stay on topic and really push his message home. Oh wait, did I say that Lucas acted in a way that sounded logically? No, he decided to condemn Jillian Michaels for adopting a Black baby, which he describes as purchasing a Black baby, because guess what? Lucas doesn't like the idea of white people taking care of Black children when Black people are unable to do so. Again, it makes him uncomfortable, the parenting situation going on in huge portions of the Black community in the United States of America. So rather than, address those problems internally, he decides that he needs to go after Jillian Michaels for actually trying to provide a home for a black child.
I don't think I
mean,
need
on
any
its
litigation
face-
from a woman who tried to downplay slavery, who tried to all lives matter slavery
you
after
wanna
she
discuss
purchased
that?
a black child. That's what I would
Purchased
argue.
a black child.
I don't think you need to
Okay.
as far as
Would you
litigate
like to
anything.
discuss it?
Okay,
Well-
especially you, who is the mother
Especially me.
of a black child, who she purchased.
Right.
Other
Is it
people
my
adopt.
turn to talk?
You purchased.
Is it?
By all means.
How did I? Okay, well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by purchase. She's adopted, and it is illegal
Did you
to
pay?
purchase a child.
Did you pay to get that child?
No, I paid the adoption agency
It was
fees to do my
absolutely free.
hope study.
It was absolutely okay.
I
So
paid
then
the
there was a
adoption
process of
agency
payment.
like you
So then there
pay
was a
to
process
adopt
of
a
payment.
child.
I
To
believe
an
that other
American
people adopt. You
adoption
purchased.
agency.
Also, and I think it is really important for me to point out that Lucas, despite the fact that he calls himself the amazing Lucas, appears to not be able to say the word palpable.
And I think that's a sentiment that is palatable.
Lucas, the word you're looking for is palpable.
Palatable.
No, Lucas, we are not becoming friends with the table. It is not pal-table. It is palpable, not palatable.
It's palatable.
And this whole entire segment was an absolute disaster in every possible way. But again, as bad as Lucas is, this is exactly what you expect when you bring him onto this show. So really, it's shame on Piers Morgan. Let's be clear about that, because when you bring a crazy person on the show, because he said crazy things, you provide a wider audience for those crazy things, all to have him repeat them on the show so you can cut clips of him saying those crazy things just so you could sound virtuous by condemning him. I still blame you for providing a much wider audience to that. And for those of you who are saying, Sean, you're repeating what Lucas is saying, well, you're gonna have to figure out that one for yourself. And again, my criticism is almost equal parts Piers Morgan as it is to Lucas, and Piers Morgan, way bigger platform than all of us. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Lucas's craziness and Piers Morgan platforming him. Till next time.